This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
I had a fun time at the True Crime Podcast Festival last weekend. It was great meeting everyone. And welcome to the new listeners who learned about my show and are joining us for this episode. It's been several weeks since I've published a show. Thank you so much for being patient. Some of these episodes take me a long time to create, and right now, I'm a team of one. Episode 10, The Murder of Susan Daniels Smith, was 60 hours in the making, and today's case was upwards of 80. I want to keep this show well-researched. So again, thanks for being patient. Know that I'm working towards bringing in research help, but that will probably mean commercials. Enough small talk. Let's get on to the show. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. College is an exciting time in a young person's life. I know that was true for me. The University of Austin has a strange history. It's a well-regarded research institution, but has been home to a few tragedies. A gun-toting ex-Marine climbed the UT clock tower with his firearm in 1966. He killed 14 people and wounded 31. There was a campus stabbing in 2017 that left 3 wounded and 1 dead. In 2005, there was a grisly murder of a 21-year-old woman named Jennifer. They considered this the most heinous crime in Austin, Texas history. Everyone on the UT campus was on edge and terrified. All the students felt unsafe, even though it was a contained situation. 1 year after the woman's death, the university installed emergency call boxes on campus. The motive for this murder was never clear. Jennifer's stepdad said that she had a heart as big as Texas, and that was what got her into trouble. Her mom said that she had a problem with picking up stray dogs, and not the 4-legged kind. You're listening to Episode 11, The Murder of Jennifer Cave, Part 1 of 2. Jennifer was the second oldest of the pack of siblings in her family. Her parents, Charlie and Sharon, owned a farmhouse in the small town of Bishop, Texas. Bishop had a population of 3,300 and was the kind of place where everyone went to bed at 9 p.m. Sharon and Charlie married in 1982 and bought the farmhouse in 1983. This was Sharon's second marriage. She had been a rebellious teenager and ran away from home when she turned 18. Sharon immediately got married and had her first daughter, Vanessa, in 1979. The marriage was rocky from the beginning and ended quickly. Sharon met Charlie soon after. He had an outgoing and charming personality. However, Sharon soon realized that Charlie was only enjoyable to be around when he wasn't drinking. She thought she could fix him, but ultimately, she would call the marriage another mistake. They had Jennifer in March 1984. She had red hair, freckles, and blue eyes. Charlie and Sharon had another daughter 14 months later and named her Lauren. Their son, Clayton, arrived a little while later. Jennifer was tight with her sister Lauren. They shared a bedroom because they were close in age, but they were very different people. Lauren easily made friends and would feel comfortable striking up a conversation with a stranger. Jennifer was quiet and shy. So Lauren made the friends at school and shared them with Jennifer. Jennifer was a smart kid, and school was easy for her. She enjoyed reading and spent a lot of time checking out books from the library. Jennifer was also a tomboy. She enjoyed fishing and playing sports with her dad, Charlie. The children grew up in a musical home. Charlie sang in a country band, and Sharon sang at church and played the piano. Charlie and Sharon both worked. He was a welder, and she did bookkeeping for a plant outside Bishop. So the kids got to spend summers on their grandparents' farm while their parents were at work. The thing about living in a small town is that everyone knows your business. And in Bishop, Texas, everyone knew that all was not well in the cave home. Charlie, the alcoholic, would stomp around the house, and his children would hide in a closet. He would carry on like this all night long. Clayton and Jennifer were often the children who would try to calm their father down, but he would just scream at them and tell them to shut up. In the sober light of the next day, Charlie would beg for forgiveness, and instead of leaving him, Sharon would grant him that forgiveness. She admits that the situation went on longer than it should have. One night Charlie came home, raging drunk, took a bunch of food from the fridge, and threw it at the wall. The next morning was Good Friday, and Sharon had to take the kids to get their Easter photos taken. She told Charlie that he better be gone by the time they returned. Charlie didn't put up any resistance, because he knew his behavior was a problem. After the divorce, the custody agreement was that Charlie was to have visitation with all his biological kids, which were Jennifer, Lauren, and Clayton. Jennifer was the only one who visited him because she was a peacemaker and never judged her father. Life moved on for the cave children. Sharon worried that Jennifer cared more about others than herself. She always brought home kids from school that didn't fit in. Sharon liked to call these kids Jennifer's strays. Sharon didn't dwell on it long because she had her hands full with her oldest daughter, Vanessa, who had become a wild child. The tension between Sharon and Vanessa was so intense that Vanessa moved out of Sharon's home during her senior year of high school and moved in with her boyfriend. Sharon was upset, but there wasn't much she could do other than wait it out. A few months later, Vanessa and her boyfriend broke up. Then Vanessa crawled back in through her bedroom window and silently rejoined the cave family. Sharon was relieved to have Vanessa back home again. Sharon met a new man through mutual friends. His name was Jim, he was a CPA, and had 2 daughters in the same age range as Sharon's daughters. Her father had recently died, and Jim specialized in wills, trusts, and estates, so he helped Sharon navigate her situation. There was a strong attraction between Jim and Sharon, and they fell easily into couplehood. She was happy that she could finally model a healthy relationship for her kids. All the children immediately welcomed Jim into their family. When Vanessa left for college, Sharon began commuting from Bishop to Corpus Christi for a marketing job, and Jim lived there as well. Sharon wasted 1 hour of her day driving to work. Jennifer and Lauren had to help take care of Clayton. Sharon was tired of the commute and trying to split up her time between everyone, so she moved the family to Corpus Christi in 2000. Clayton stayed behind and moved in with his father, Charlie. Jennifer did not want to move. She enjoyed Bishop with the small class sizes at her high school. Her new school in Corpus would have over 2,000 students. Lauren integrated easily into the new school situation, and Jennifer's transition didn't go as well because she had self-esteem issues. Lauren adjusted her entire class schedule so she could share the same lunch period with her sister. At least the academic part of high school was easy for Jennifer. She had a near photographic memory and rarely had to study. When Jennifer took a part-time job working at a restaurant, she began hanging out with a new group of friends. These friends liked to drink and threw weekend parties at the home of any out-of-town parents. Jennifer started drinking to fit in, and she had a growing disinterest in school. Lauren was not sure who this new Jennifer was. Lauren did not want to hang out with party kids and earn a bad reputation at school. She put a little distance between herself and her sister. Jennifer's friends would often call Lauren and ask her to pick up Jennifer from those weekend parties. Lauren perpetually worried that something bad was going to happen. Now it was Jennifer's turn to clash with her mother. Sharon did not approve of the new life choices that Jennifer made during her senior year of high school. Jennifer would often lie about where she had been and what she had been doing. She had a new boyfriend that brought her home after 2 a.m. one night. Sharon met them outside the house and shouted at the young man with so much vitriol that he never showed his face again. Another night, police pulled over Jennifer and one of her girlfriends, and they found pot in the car. The young women were arrested until her friend admitted that the drugs were hers, and they dropped the charges against Jennifer. Jim would try to calm Sharon down by telling her that Jennifer would not listen if she kept getting so upset. Sharon really hoped that Jennifer would outgrow this party phase. When Sharon would try to talk to Jennifer about the poor choices she was making, Jennifer would say that's what she gets for uprooting her life in Bishop and planting her in Corpus Christi. Partying is what the kids did in Corpus. Jim would try to talk to Jennifer about the direction of her life. He never got through to her, even though he was much less abrasive than Sharon was. Jennifer graduated high school in 2002, despite living the party girl lifestyle during her senior year. Jennifer Cave continued on to college. She enrolled in Texas State University in San Marcos and chose finance as her major. She really had mixed feelings about the whole situation and didn't set any goals. At Jim and Sharon's urging, Jennifer rushed to sorority. They wanted to get her in with a good group of friends. She only lasted a few days because it wasn't her thing. Jennifer would intentionally not tell her mother certain facts about her life, but then would tell her sister Lauren. She knew that Lauren would end up telling their mom. Jennifer overdrew her bank account, and when Lauren told Sharon the news, Sharon had a knee-jerk reaction. Instead of confronting Jennifer, she yelled at Lauren. Lauren started to resent her sister for turning her into the messenger who brought the bad news. That first semester of college, Jennifer called Lauren from jail. Lauren immediately passed the message to their mom, knowing that she would take action. Sharon bailed her daughter out of jail. Apparently, Jennifer was in a dorm room with a male student who was caught smoking pot. He owned up to the police and admitted that the pot was his. They dropped the criminal charges against Jennifer. But this situation violated campus conduct, and she wouldn't be allowed to return for the spring semester. Jennifer didn't really care. She didn't want to be in college anyway. It frustrated Sharon that her daughter was hanging out with people who got her into trouble. She didn't understand why she kept picking up these drifters. After her first and only semester at Southwest Texas, Jennifer followed a boyfriend to the city of Austin. She found a job working at a restaurant and enrolled in Austin Community College. Even though she was a handful, Charlie loved his daughter Jennifer, and he helped her move into her next apartment. Jennifer's parents hoped that she would get her life back on track by moving to Austin and hitting reset on attending college. What Sharon did not consider was that Austin had a nightlife with a prominent drug scene. And there was no way anyone could have predicted that Jennifer Cave would meet a man named Colton Pitonyak, who would help derail Jennifer's attempts to correct the course of her life. Eddie and Bridget Pitonyak had 2 sons, and they named the youngest Colton. Eddie was a farmer who had moved into the farm machinery business. He eventually founded a company that bought and sold farm equipment. Bridget sold real estate. They lived in Little Rock, Arkansas, and were considered the upper class. Doctors, lawyers, and company executives all lived in their neighborhood. Eddie and his older son enjoyed hunting and fishing together. Colton had no interest in any of it, and he never joined them on their outings. Colton was a smart kid. He was talking before he could walk, and he was reading by the age of 3. His parents gave him every advantage in life that they could afford, and it seemed like it was paying off. Colton had a strong personality, and he often overwhelmed his teachers. Even when they thought Colton wasn't paying attention, he would ace the test. He went to a Catholic high school, was a National Merit Scholar, spoke French, played guitar and piano, and scored a 32 on his ACTs. An unfortunate side effect of having a high IQ was that Colton developed a considerable ego. He started drinking and smoking pot. He was getting into physical fights because he wanted to portray himself as a tough guy and thought it would make him popular. Most kids move into the dorms during their freshman year at UT Austin. Colton pledged Delta Tau Delta and moved into the frat house instead. The Delta Tau House was a beautiful stone building with leather couches and a parking lot full of SUVs, pickup trucks, and basketball and tennis courts. One of the fraternity's prize facts was that Matthew McConaughey was a Delta Tau Delta member when he attended UT Austin in the 90s. The fraternity enjoyed talking about raising money for charity and other philanthropic endeavors, but the reality was all the students were there to party. Colton was a dichotomy of sorts. He was a Catholic schoolboy and a high achiever from the suburbs of Little Rock. Colton wore Ralph Lauren polo shirts with a backwards baseball hat and jeans. But all of his clothes were oversized, and he tried to emulate rap artists on music videos who bragged about doing drugs. He also thought he was a tough guy for heading into the rough parts of Little Rock to score coke. His collegiate peers were not sure what to make of him or knew if he was even believable. Colton was the person likely to drink too much, then wake up outside the frat house. He once slept on a pile of trash bags after a large party they had in the tennis court. One rumor that went around during that time was that Colton had tortured and killed a cat after an evening of drinking and smoking to excess. Most major cities have a famous street. In Memphis, Tennessee, it's Beale Street. Madison, Wisconsin has State Street. And in New Orleans, everyone parties on Bourbon Street. In Austin, Texas, 6th Street is located in the famous entertainment district. Students gravitate to a portion of 6th Street known as the Drag. For UT students, it has dive bars, live music, vintage shops, restaurants, tattoo shops, massage parlors, and panhandlers. Colton Pitonyak was at home on 6th Street. He was usually not sober and didn't have a problem picking fights with other 6th Street patrons. Despite all the outside distractions, Colton majored in finance and was doing well academically. In 2002, he began his sophomore year by moving out of the frat house and into an apartment. Colton spent less time with his frat brothers because he really didn't fit in with that crowd. That spring semester, Colton locked up a 3.5 GPA and was on the track for a bright future in business. He was on a $150,000 business school scholarship. By his junior year in 2003, his grades slipped. He rarely attended class and spent time holed up in his apartment. Many of his peers wondered if the drugs had taken a front row seat in his life. His frat brothers pulled away because they disliked his preferred topics of conversation: drugs, drug deals, and prices he paid for drugs. Colton got too close when he talked. His breath smelled like stale alcohol, and his laugh was obnoxious. One of his friends stopped returning his calls, then deleted Colton's number from his cell phone, knowing that there was nothing positive that could come from hanging out with Colton Pitonyak. Some fraternity members maintained contact with Colton because it was easier to buy drugs from him than to seek some stranger out on 6th Street. Colton was even so bold as to walk up to college students he didn't know and offer to sell them drugs. By the winter of 2003, Colton was drunk and high every single day. In December, he went to jail for driving while under the influence. After he was released, his mom packed him up and took him home for a few weeks to get him straightened out. When Colton went back to college, jail time had no impact on his behavior, and he bragged about it. They negotiated his charge down from a DUI to obstructing a highway passage. The only major consequence was that UT suspended him. Colton enrolled in classes at Austin Community College while he was on suspension from UT. A few months later, he met Jennifer Cave. Her spring semester wasn't going well. She rarely went to class and was not interested in studying. She dropped most of her classes that semester. Other parts of her life were fulfilling, and she seemed to be happy. Jennifer loved living in Austin. She worked as a hostess at a steakhouse. She had a boyfriend named Mark and was in love with him. Jennifer started up school again for the fall semester, but her dad, Charlie, had a stroke. Jennifer commuted between Austin and Sinton to take care of him. This hindered another semester, and she dropped her classes again. Jennifer's mom, Sharon, was growing tired of her daughter's failed attempts at college and told her that she would be off the family dime if she didn't successfully move forward with school. Jennifer worried about money and moved in with a friend for a few months. She couldn't pay her half of the bills, so her friend asked her to move out. Mark broke up with her, which threw her into a tailspin. She arrived to her hostess job, both late and high, so they fired her on the spot. Around the spring of 2004, Jennifer and Colton had struck up a friendship when they met at a party. Shortly after, he began supplying her with drugs. That summer, Jennifer had a new job working at Nordstrom's, and one of her coworkers said that she would disappear for days and be over at Colton's apartment. The drugs were no longer recreational. She was a habitual user. They weren't dating, but Colton liked Jennifer a lot. He treated her like a girlfriend. One of Jennifer's friends said he was touchy-feely with her and possessive of her. When Colton was doing financially well selling drugs, he would buy Jennifer dinner, take her out for a night on the town, and give her all the dope she wanted. Colton liked cocaine and Xanax, along with a variety of other substances. Jennifer preferred ecstasy and meth. One night, Jennifer went out with one of her friends she'd met at a club. They ended up at a meth house, where people passed a crack pipe around. All the faces looked weathered and broken down as they leaned over to take their turn on the pipe. The realization hit Jennifer that if she didn't change, her face might look like that one day. Violence was a mainstay in Colton Pitonyak's life. He wanted to be a thug and a gangster. He had no problem smashing one of his customers' faces into a table as the unsuspecting student did a line of coke. He was behind on paying Colton for drugs and needed to be taught a lesson. One night, Colton stayed over at his friend Justin's place. When Justin got up and walked into the living room, he saw Colton sleeping on the couch with a gun resting on the floor. Colton had pulled knives out in the past, causing Justin to institute a no-weapons policy in his apartment. But in that moment, Justin was afraid and opted to not confront Colton about the gun. There was an incident at Colton's apartment complex, and someone dialed 911. When officers arrived, they knocked on Colton's door and asked to come inside. Colton didn't seem bothered by all the drugs he left lying around his apartment. Police found a white powder sitting on the table, plus Xanax and Ambien. They tested the white powder, and it was positive for cocaine. Colton did not have a prescription for the Ambien and Xanax. They arrested him on felony charges, and he faced up to 2 years in prison. Colton didn't tell his parents, posted his own bail, and hired a lawyer. Colton was again unaffected by the deep levels of legal trouble that he was wading in. This did not deter him from using or selling drugs. A few weeks later, he moved to a pricey area of campus called the Orange Tree Condos. It was the summer of 2004, and Colton should have been starting his senior year at UT, but he only had enough credits to be considered a sophomore. Colton's attorney wanted him to go to rehab so he can negotiate a deal, but the prosecutor wasn't amenable to reducing charges. Colton entered rehab later that fall. He told them what they wanted to hear so he could complete the program. That fall, Jennifer didn't have a job and was living with a different friend who also kicked her out. Jennifer moved in with Colton, but it only lasted 1 month. When someone asked her why she didn't stay, Jennifer would only say that she didn't feel safe and never offered additional details. One night, Colton's friend Justin and Jennifer were hanging out when Colton showed up. He needed to talk with Jen in private. She told him no way. He begged and said that Justin would stay in the room with them. She finally agreed. Colton wanted them to be a couple and told Jennifer that he loved her. She did not feel the same way. The more Colton persisted, the more Jennifer told him no. Colton became louder and more aggressive. Jennifer told Colton that he scared her and she couldn't be with someone like that. Then Colton asked her if she was scared, because maybe he just might have a knife. He then pulled out a large hunting knife and unfolded it to show her the sizable, shiny blade. Jennifer ran and hid in a closet. Colton went after her, but Justin intervened. He made Colton put the knife away and reminded him of the no weapons policy at his apartment. Then Justin told Colton to leave, and he spent the rest of his time calming Jennifer down. Now, this is the point in the story where you're hoping that Jennifer parts ways with Colton, but the young woman with the heart as big as Texas doesn't end their friendship here. She forgave Colton and continued hanging out with him. After the incident, Jennifer told her friends that she and Colton agreed just to be pals, even though he wanted more. To her own detriment, she was always the peacemaker. She always worked hard to avoid and prevent conflicts. Colton introduced Jennifer to his dad, Eddie, in October 2004, when he was in Austin on business. Jennifer was the only female name that Colton ever mentioned to his parents, and Eddie and Bridget Pitonyak heard Jennifer Cave's name mentioned often that year. That winter, Jennifer met a man named Scott, and she quickly moved into his apartment. They had a mutual friend and met at a party. Jennifer had originally gone on a few dates with Scott's friend, but she and Scott connected with each other when she needed a ride home, and they ended up talking for hours. She liked his genuine and warm personality. He was 4 years older than her, and at 25 was mature because he had a 4-year-old daughter named Madison to care for. When Jennifer moved into Scott's apartment, she took a more domesticated role with doing all the cooking, cleaning, and caring for Madison. Scott knew that Jennifer used drugs, but he set clear boundaries with her. He would not allow drugs into his home because of his daughter. But Scott was also understanding. He had done coke and LSD when he was younger. After he had an out-of-body experience when he was high, it shook him, and he cut back on his use of recreational drugs. Scott's influence in Jennifer's life was positive, and she backed off her drug use. She gained weight and started to look healthy. Jennifer, Scott, and Madison attended church on some Sundays, and by most measuring sticks, had cobbled together a successful notion of family. Scott knew of Jennifer's friendship with Colton, a friendship that centered around doing drugs. One night, when Scott and Jennifer attended a party, Colton showed up. He was talking at warp speed, yet was saying nothing. It wasn't surprising that hard drugs and alcohol were behind Colton's word salad. He pulled Scott aside and told him that if he ever needed anyone taken care of, he was the man for the job. Scott didn't believe him and thought Colton was just showing off. Colton told Scott that he wanted to get off drugs and he wanted to get his life back in order. Scott thought that maybe he could help Colton too. The phone at Jennifer and Scott's apartment would ring late at night. Jennifer would leave the house saying that Colton needed her help. Scott was never jealous of Colton and understood that Jennifer was being a good friend. When Colton's parents came to Austin for a conference, he invited both Scott and Jennifer to go out to dinner. Scott estimated that Colton was trying to impress his parents by inviting along friends who present well. At dinner, Colton claimed that he was studying a lot and school was going well. It might have not been clear to Eddie and Bridget Pitonyak, but it was obvious to Scott that Colton was high. In 2005, Colton would meet a woman named Laura Ashley Hall. She grew up in the blue-collar, middle-class town of Crosby, Texas. Her mom worked for a surgeon, and her dad was a yacht broker. They owned one of the nicer homes in town. Laura also went to UT and studied government. She wanted to be a lawyer and worked at a law firm, where she did filing, ran errands, and filled out reports. Hall was not a popular woman. One of her friends would say that she was not a people person, and was blind to the rudeness that she subjected her friends and acquaintances to. A neighbor said that she was moody, and people had a hard time responding to her. Other friends described her as attention-seeking. She had a bad habit of investing everything she had into her boyfriends. Then when the relationship wouldn't work out, it would devastate her. One of her neighbors at UT found Laura's high school yearbook in their apartment's dumpster. Laura had written a variety of words next to the pictures of teachers and students. Some of the words were shithead, lesbian, slut. Next to a few boys, she wrote cute and fine. Laura was friends with Colton's friend Justin. She hung out often at Justin's apartment. She was always involved in some kind of drama related to being depressed and hating her life. One of Laura's ex-boyfriends stopped over at Justin's place, which prompted Laura to lay outside in the grass, where she cried, squealed, and caused a melodramatic scene. It was clear to those around her she had significant emotional issues. When Laura met Colton at a party in 2005, he was doing his best gangster impersonation. He wore a black leather sport coat and jeans. He talked about drugs and guns. Colton immediately intrigued Laura, and she pressured Justin into giving her Colton's phone number. Justin thought that the pairing of Colton and Laura was the world's worst idea, so he lied and told Laura that Colton already had a girlfriend. Laura didn't care. She took down Colton's phone number anyway. Colton and Laura kind of dated, but it would depend on who you asked. Some people said that Colton only used Laura for sexual purposes. One undeniable fact was that Laura was crazy about Colton, and it bordered on an obsession. She couldn't stop talking about him. Laura also didn't like Colton having connections to other women, especially Jennifer Cave. The thought of Colton spending time with anyone caused her jealousy to boil over. And Colton talked to Jennifer on a near-daily basis, which seeded Laura's insecurities. After meeting Colton, Laura started showing up to work late. She also dressed sexier and talked tougher. She lost weight, had circles under her eyes, talked about drugs and money, and got high a lot. Colton's drug business expanded, and he had a small crew of friends that helped him unload 4,000 ecstasy tabs each week. Colton would usually hold about 1,000 tabs for himself. E and coke were not cutting it anymore, so Colton tried heroin, but found that he didn't like the feeling of the high. He tried smoking meth, and that became his new drug of choice. Meth can keep a person awake until they become sleep-deprived and paranoid. Colton was consuming a few grams or $300 worth of meth a day. In the spring of 2005, one of Colton's female friends felt that there was a major shift in his personality. He had a bad habit of stopping by her apartment unannounced. She knew he was high all the time, but it mostly entertained her. She thought that Colton was harmless, until one night when he stopped by her place at 3 a.m. with a stripper he had picked up at the bar. He forced his way into the apartment and didn't take the hint when she told him to move on for the night. Colton acted paranoid, thought someone was after him, and watched the door. That was the last time she ever opened the door for Colton Pitonyak. It was June 2005, and Colton still had to deal with his felony drug charge. He could plead guilty to the felony and serve no jail time, or he could plead down to a misdemeanor and serve 60 days in jail. He opted for the misdemeanor with the jail time. Colton going to jail was a blessing for Jennifer Cave. She didn't have to be distracted by his constant drama and daily need to talk. It relieved Jennifer's friends because they felt Colton was not a safe person for her to be around. Jennifer still defended him to her friends. She insisted that Colton was a sweet person when he was sober. Jennifer and Scott had been fighting about money. They had an agreement that Jennifer was to find a job and economically contribute to the household, but 6 months had passed, and she had not taken steps to find a job. Scott even found her a hostess job at one point, but she only worked there for a few days and quit. Jennifer began questioning if she was ready to play the role of wife and mother. She was still very young and had only turned 21 a few months prior. Scott and Jennifer broke up on the 4th of July. She moved out of his apartment and moved in with her friend Denise. She told Scott that she needed her independence and space. Jennifer called her mom and told her that she had broken up with Scott, was looking for a job, and wanted to register for classes at the community college in fall. Jennifer was feeling optimistic about her life. Sharon had concerns about Jennifer moving in with her friend Denise, who had prior drug issues, but she tried to be supportive of her daughter. Colton spent a grand total of 20 days in jail, and they released him on the 20th of June, 2005. He got a jailhouse tattoo that said felon. Unfortunately, his jailhouse tattoo artist wasn't the best at spelling and inked the letters Fellon onto Colton. Laura and Colton were still in a dysfunctional quasi-relationship. She would lend Colton money, and he wouldn't pay her back. She would have to call friends and ask them for money to pay her rent. Laura would also call her friends and tell them that she thought Colton was cheating on her. She told one friend that Colton was so high that he shot a gun in his apartment. Laura's friends were not sympathetic and had grown tired of Laura calling them with her overly dramatic, self-inflicted problems. Colton had burned Laura with a cigarette when they were high. Her friends told her that it was not okay, but she just shrugged it off. That summer, Colton was doing meth and staying up for days at a time. He forgot to lock his door, and someone stole $1,500 worth of drugs. After that, Colton started keeping guns in his apartment. It was early August 2005, and Jennifer was really putting effort into finding a job. She had a job interview with the office manager of a small law firm that included 2 attorneys and a few support staff. She nailed the interview and was invited back for a second round on August 16th. When she met the attorneys, they hired her on the spot, and she started work that same day. When they saw Jennifer work, they offered her the full-time administrative assistant job that came with salary and benefits, instead of giving her the part-time $10 an hour job she applied for. Jennifer was thrilled and thought this was a major step in getting back on track. After her breakup with Scott, Jennifer started casually dating Scott's friend Eli. They decided not to tell Scott right away, but he suspected it. Scott's mutual friend confirmed that Jennifer and Eli were seeing each other. Scott was so upset that he sent Jennifer a scathing email. But later that day, he regretted what he had done. He went to Jennifer's house to talk in person. Scott apologized, and they reconciled their friendship on the evening of August 16th. Jennifer told her roommate Denise that she had plans to stay in that night. She had to get up early the next day for day 2 of her new job. Colton left Jennifer a voicemail that day. She returned it later that night. Jennifer left the apartment sometime around 10:30 p.m., saying nothing to Denise. She picked up Colton and headed down to 6th Street. They ran into some of Jennifer's friends who were celebrating a birthday, and everyone went to a bar called Treasure Island. Jennifer's friend Melissa started to hit it off with Colton. Colton gave Melissa his whole life story. He told her that he was successful at the beginning of his college career, but drugs derailed him. Now he wanted to stop using drugs and get back to business school. Then, almost in the same breath, he said he had to go meet friends to pick up an 8-ball, and he wanted to know if Melissa would go with him. When Melissa asked Jennifer about Colton, she said not to mess with him because he was unstable and had tons of emotional baggage. Another friend told Melissa that they would not let her go anywhere with Colton. Melissa ultimately declined Colton's invitation. It was just after midnight, and everyone headed to another bar. When Melissa and her birthday crew sat down at a table, Jennifer and Colton had disappeared. Melissa wondered if Colton had talked Jennifer into picking up the drugs with him. Right after midnight, Jennifer called Michael Rodriguez, a new guy that she had been talking to. They had not yet dated, but were interested in one another. She told him that she was still out with her friend Colton, but needed to get back home soon because she had to work in the morning. They said goodbye and hung up the phone. It was just after 1 a.m., and Michael was watching TV when he received another call from Jennifer. She told him that they were finally leaving, and she needed to get home. Michael heard chaos in the background. Colton was trying to bust a car window because he was angry that he lost his cell phone. Michael asked Jennifer if everything was okay. She said that everything was fine, and she would call him when she got home. Michael went back to watching TV and fell asleep for the rest of the night. It was 3 a.m. at the Orange Tree condos. Colton knocked on his neighbor Nora Sullivan's door. She opened the door, and Colton barged into her condo, asking if she heard gunshots. She said she heard nothing. Colton droned on about some story involving drug dealers and trading gunfire. It was late, Colton was high, and Nora wasn't into his absurdity, so she tuned him out. Colton claimed he shot one of the drug dealers. He showed her his gun and asked if she could see blood on it. Nora dismissed Colton, and he returned to his apartment for the night. Back at Jennifer's apartment, it was now 6:15 in the morning. Denise got up and went to check on her roommate. She didn't want Jennifer to be late for her new job. Her bed was made, and her work clothes were laid out, but there was no one in the room. Denise felt that something was off, but then put that feeling aside. Maybe Jennifer stayed overnight at one of her friends' apartments, as 21-year-olds are prone to do. Laura Hall also wasn't at her apartment when Colton called her cell phone. She had slept over at a friend's place. When Laura and Colton ended the call, she woke her friend and asked him to drive her to her car because she had to leave. It was 8:30 a.m. at the law firm, and they noticed Jennifer had not shown up for work yet. It made little sense because she was so enthusiastic about the job the day before. One attorney waited a little while, then left a message on Jennifer's cell phone. Later that day, the office manager from the law firm drove out to Jennifer's apartment to check on her, but no one answered the door. At 10:30 a.m., Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, Scott, texted her to wish her a great day at her new job. She didn't reply to him, so he figured that she was busy. Jennifer's new friend, Michael Rodriguez, decided it was time to give her a ring. He wanted to make sure that her night went okay after all the chaos he heard when they were last on the phone at 1 a.m. Jennifer didn't answer her phone, so he left a message. Jennifer's employers had growing concerns and called Jennifer's mother. Sharon called some of Jennifer's friends in Austin, but she could not track her daughter down. She owned the account for all her kids' cell phones and called T-Mobile. They gave her Jennifer's cell phone log for the past 2 days. When they faxed the phone records to Sharon, she saw that Jennifer's last call was at 1:05 a.m. She immediately knew something was wrong. Jennifer was a phone junkie and was always on her phone chatting with someone. Back in Austin, it was afternoon, and Colton was at the hardware store. His list included latex gloves, ammonia, Febreze, dust masks, carpet cleaner, paper towels, and 55-gallon trash bags. Oh, and he needed a saw. The hardware store owner asked the glassy-eyed customer what he needed the saw for. Colton said he was frying a frozen turkey. The shop owner directed him to a utility hacksaw. He also noticed that this kid reeked of booze. Colton went to the Burger King drive-thru after he left the hardware store. He uttered, "Soda, fries, and burger, hold onions," into the intercom. Laura Hall was running her own errands that afternoon. She was at the gas station, filling up her green Cadillac and getting it washed. She needed to get it ready for the trip that they were about to embark on. In Corpus Christi, Sharon was panicking. She called Scott to run through some phone numbers Jennifer had called. Scott recognized Colton's number, and Sharon remembered Jennifer talking about him at some point. He was that kid who went to jail. Sharon wanted to know more about this Colton. Scott said he was trouble, and that he used and sold drugs. When Sharon spoke with Jennifer's roommate, Denise, she did not like Colton either. Sharon dialed Colton Pitonyak's number, and he didn't pick up, so she left a message. Sharon decided to call the last number from the phone records that Jennifer made at 1:05 a.m. Michael Rodriguez told Sharon that her daughter did not sound drunk on the phone. She seemed fine and was out with someone named Colton. At that point, Sharon had an incoming call and put Michael on hold. It was Colton. He told Sharon that he saw Jennifer last night, but they got in an argument, and she left at midnight. That was all he knew. Sharon got back on the line with Michael. When Sharon relayed what Colton just told her, Michael told Sharon that Colton was flat out lying. Michael knew that Colton was still out with Jennifer when she called him after 1 a.m. This made Sharon feel unwell. Scott was thinking about this entire situation, and he wasn't buying any of it. Jennifer wasn't missing. He thought Jennifer had slipped up and was holed up somewhere doing drugs. So Scott called Colton and said that he knew Jennifer was at his house. Scott was firm and told Colton that Jennifer needed to call her mom back, else Sharon would call the cops. Colton was combative and said that he knew nothing. And he ended the call by saying that bitch would get him arrested. Sharon called the Austin Police Department to report her daughter missing. They informed her that Jennifer could only technically be missing after a 24-hour period lapsed, since she was an adult. She could call back in the morning to file a missing persons report. Sharon called the morgue and every hospital in Austin, but no one had encountered a Jennifer cave. Sharon's boyfriend, Jim Sedgwick, called Colton from Sharon's phone and left a commanding message. Jim said that they knew he was the last person Jennifer was with, and they involved the police. A little while later, Sharon's cell phone rang, and it was Colton. Sharon told him that they knew Jennifer was with him after midnight, and she wanted to know where her daughter was. He told Sharon that he was having pizza with his friend, and to stop bothering him. With that, their call ended abruptly. That evening, Colton and his mother had an unusual text exchange. Bridget Pitonyak sent a message to Colton, asking him to text her. Her message continued, and it said that she was a nervous wreck because she didn't know what was going on. He only texted her back 3 words: "Going to Houston." Sharon and Jim were beside themselves with worry, so they decided that the next logical step was to travel to Austin in the morning. As Sharon and Jim tossed and turned in their bed that night, Laura Hall arrived in Del Rio, Texas, right around 3 a.m. She handed their passports to the Border Patrol at the checkpoint, then rolled on through to Mexico. Sharon and Jim got up early and met with family friend and private investigator Sidney Smith. Sid was a former sergeant in the Corpus Christi Homicide PD. He advised Jim and Sharon to call the Austin police again. Sid was most concerned with Colton lying about the time of his last contact with Jennifer. Sharon placed the missing persons call, and Austin PD put a be on the lookout request out for Jennifer. 2 hours after leaving Corpus Christi, Austin detective Kathleen Hector called Sharon back. PD could not get Colton to answer his cell phone, so they pulled up his driver's license and found his address at the Orange Tree condos. When Detective Hector stopped by Colton's place, she found Jennifer's car parked across the street. She left a note on the windshield, asking Jennifer to call her mother. The detective knocked on Colton's door. There was no answer inside of Unit 88. She couldn't find anyone on site who could let her into the apartment. So she left a card in the door, asking Colton to call her. Sharon begged the detective to enter the apartment because she was convinced that Jennifer was inside. Detective Hector didn't have probable cause to enter the apartment. She also thought Jennifer was probably fine. You know how kids are. Sharon was almost regretful that she mentioned Jennifer's past drug use to the detective and feared the situation would not be treated with as much seriousness as it deserved. Jim told Sharon that their plan was to first go to Colton's apartment. Vanessa, Sharon's oldest daughter, was also heading to the Orange Tree condos. She was about 1 hour ahead of her parents. When Vanessa arrived in Austin, she knocked on Colton's door, and when no one responded, she called her mom and told her she was ready to kick in the window. Her mom told her to wait and that they'd be there soon. So Vanessa called PI Sidney Smith and asked if there was anything she could do while waiting for her mom and Jim to arrive. Sid directed her to look for Colton's car. Vanessa went to the parking garage and found a white Toyota Avalon with Arkansas plates in spot 88. She read the license plate number to Sid so he could look it up. In the meantime, Vanessa's friend from childhood, Aaron, had lived in Austin and joined Vanessa for emotional support. Sharon and Jim arrived at the Orange Tree condos. Sharon took out her spare key for Jennifer's car. Everything in the car seemed fine. There were no messes or anything out of place. So they all walked up to Colton's second-floor unit. Jim pounded on the door with authority. There was still no answer. Sharon called Detective Kathleen Hector again. She said that her daughter was inside that apartment and was being held hostage. Detective Hector stressed to Sharon that she couldn't enter the apartment without cause. The detective suggested that they hang out by Jennifer's car and wait for her to return. Jim, Sharon, Vanessa, and Aaron regrouped and went to check into their hotel. They took Jennifer's car with them. If Jennifer came back and her car was gone, she would either call her mom or the police. Once in their hotel room, Sharon looked up phone numbers for every Pitonyak from Arkansas. After dialing a few numbers, she finally got through to a family member, who then left a message with Colton's father, Eddie Pitonyak. Eddie called Sharon and said all he knew was that Colton used his mom's credit card to take Jennifer out for dinner the other night. Eddie Pitonyak was not sympathetic to Sharon's situation and communicated that he wanted her to stay away from his family. Sharon became upset and handed the phone to Jim. Jim was calm and restated that they just needed help finding Jennifer. Jim did not inspire compassion in Eddie Pitonyak. Eddie said that his wife Bridget thought that ever since Colton met Jennifer, she has been the problem in this entire situation. Jim hung up the phone and silently admitted to himself that this was more serious than he originally imagined. He thought that he'd better return Jennifer's car back to where they found it. Maybe they had disrupted evidence by moving it. Jim, Sharon, Vanessa, and Aaron went back to the Orange Tree condos and checked the parking garage. Colton's car was still there. And since they had Jennifer's car, they both had to be in that apartment. Jim had enough and dialed 911. They quickly dispatched an officer to their location. The police told them the same thing as Detective Hector. With no probable cause, police could not enter the unit. Jim said screw that and called a locksmith. When the locksmith arrived and attempted to pick the lock, he couldn't get the thing to budge. Apparently, it was a high-security lock, and they were out of luck. It was almost 10 p.m., and everyone had been at Colton's door for 6 hours. They couldn't wait around anymore and decided to break into the apartment. They unlatched the lock to Colton's window and pushed it open. Sharon said that she was going inside. Jim wouldn't allow it and crawled through the window himself. He called out to anyone who might be there to not shoot him and that he was just looking for Jennifer. The place was in disarray. There were papers, clothes, books, and stuff everywhere, except for the kitchen, which was spotless. As Jim looked down the hallway, he noticed a rancid stench. He walked down the hall and opened the bathroom door on the left. The smell hit him in the face and about knocked him over. Jim turned the bathroom light on and almost went into shock. He ran back to the window and instructed his family to dial 911. There was a body inside the apartment. Vanessa dialed 911 but was so hysterical that all she managed to transmit was high-pitched, blood-curdling screams into the phone. Aaron reached for the phone and took over with the 911 operator. Jim knew he had to go back inside and inspect the bathroom. Sharon wanted to go inside too, but Vanessa held her back. When Jim came outside again, he was pale, and he took over on the phone with 911. The operator wanted to know if the victim was conscious and breathing. Jim said no, and he thought she was dead. He had seen a decomposing body in the bathtub with a large trash bag on the floor next to it. There was a saw laying across the body's chest. He didn't have to look inside the trash bag to know that Jennifer's head would be found inside it. Sharon and Vanessa were crying and unable to speak. When officers and EMTs arrived, they went into the apartment. An officer took one look in the bathroom and saw the headless body. He ordered everyone out and declared it a crime scene. The EMTs paired up with each of the family members to keep them calm. They also split everyone up so police could take uncorrupted statements from the witnesses. The The press must have found out about the incident because a news helicopter circled over the condo complex. They escorted the family to Austin Police Department headquarters around 1 a.m. The detective told Jim that they must have interrupted Colton when they called him, which is why he didn't finish dismembering Jennifer's body. After they completed the interviews, the detective went up to Jim and told him not to tell anyone what he saw in that apartment, not even Sharon. They wanted to arrest Colton first, and they didn't want this information out in the public until after the arrest took place. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Stay tuned, because I'll be posting part 2 of this case soon. Please visit BeyondContemptPodcast.com for links to the sources used in this episode. The featured podcast is a new show called Invisible Choir. I dig it. I signed up for their bonus content on Patreon. Check them out.
Invisible Choir, a true crime podcast that explores the most egregious and heinous murders through primary source audio and investigative storytelling. These are the tragic stories of the missing and the dead, their voices reaching out from beyond the grave, seeking peace and yearning for justice. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Go to invisiblechoir.com to learn more.